Good morning. My name is Amanda Kovattana. I am a resident of San Mateo County, a registered Democrat, and a longtime lesbian activist for gay rights. I attended Castellea School for Girls in Palo Alto and swam competitively on our swim team. I am dismayed that girls are now being asked to deny the reality of biological sex because a boy has been allowed to entertain the idea that he was born in the wrong body. I am from Thailand, where we would laugh at such an idea because we believe in reincarnation. So everyone is born in the wrong body, a different body, from one that may have been the opposite sex in our last life. I was a gender non-conforming child in Thailand. How glad I am that my culture accepted this as a correct expression of my soul, despite the sex stereotypes associated with my female body. I see American trans activists culturally appropriating my culture's third gender acceptance as proof that there is such a thing as gender identity, and then attempting to shore that up with sketchy science that points to the rare cases of disorders of sex development in order to negate the reality that there are only two sexes. Every American school that allows a male or female to play on a team of the opposite sex is teaching children this new religion of gender identity and claiming it as fact. American culture has hardly overcome its homophobia, and now it is teaching gay children that they could be the opposite sex, and girls that they can opt out of the burden of their female sex. Please stop this madness. You do not have to go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. We're here today to talk with Amanda Kovattana. She wrote this awesome book, The Unexpected Penis, Conversations on the Gender Trail, which I just finished. And let me tell you, for me to finish a book is amazing because I'm not a reader. My attention span is so difficult to like hold together, but it was an easy read. And it was just like, it was really like, what I liked about it, it was just seemed like a very natural voice.
Oh, glad to hear it.
You know, just the woman talking about her experiences and just laying it out there. And it was great. I love that kind of writing.
Good to hear.
So,
I wanted it to be accessible.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, there's been a ton of other books that have gone deep down into the whole, like, you know, history and philosophy and the whole stuff behind it. So did you read, well, I'm sure you did. Did you read Helen Joyce's book, Trans?
Yes.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was very clear. She got a little carried away with the analysis of the Matrix movie. Actually, I guess that was pertinent at the time.
Well, I found that really interesting, though, just because I don't know, because it is being hooked into the machine, right? And that's kind of what transhumanism wants to do. And anyways.
That's right. Yes, it had a lot to add if you knew the movie.
Yeah, I guess that you had to know the movie, huh?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's give a little bit of history, just kind of a brief introduction history of you and your past and your present.
Well, I was born in England of young parents who met in university. One Thai, my father is Thai and my mother's English. And then as soon as he finished his degree, we went back to Thailand, where he has a family homestead, and we lived in an extended family of his mother, stepfather, aunts, assorted staff. So a household of maybe 8 or 9 people with children to play with, and a big complex, a big compound, big yard and everything to explore. So yes, that was,
How old were you? So you were born in England, but how old were you when you went back to live in Thailand?
I was 3 and
Okay.
lived there until I was 10. So some quite formative years. I am bilingual, but I was educated in the English schools there for expats.
Okay.
So my world has always been partly English informed and Thai. But because I didn't readily translate Thai into English in my mind, all those Buddhist concepts and ideas about reincarnation had to come later when I could explain it to myself in English.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. It's because it's just so ingrained in the culture that it's not.
Yes, yes. It's like, how do I pull this out? There's not really language. I was able to understand Buddhism because I joined the Buddhist Sangha here in California.
Mhm.
And as I listened to the Dharma talks, I was like, yeah, that's of course, that's how I was raised. So
Yeah.
it put into English what I understood innately as a Thai person.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
66 last week.
66. Okay. And a lesbian, how long you been out?
I came out in high school. I kind of knew junior high, almost, well, no one else was coming out at that time because we were so repressed and closeted. I did have a couple of girlfriends who acknowledged being bi, which was kind of how I thought of myself as well, because it was a girls' school.
Mhm.
How could you know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until college that I could fully explore all of this. And I came out in college and then later on became more political. At first, I avoided all of the politics of the time because it was so rigid somehow. All the lesbians were wearing their flannel shirts and overalls and had their hair cut.
Was this the 70s?
Yes.
So it was a lot of the second wave radical feminist type
Oh, yes.
stuff, right? Yeah.
Right. And I didn't entirely understand it. I was in theater and dance, so everything was a costume, a role, a persona.
Mhm.
And I was much more admiring of the Marlene Dietrich presentation of being a butch lesbian, wearing a nice tuxedo. And
Yeah. So do you consider yourself a butch lesbian?
from my Thai background, I do.
Okay, what?
Because in Thailand, I would be recognized as a Tom, short for tomboy,
Okay.
even with my long hair. Here in the States, my presentation is so mixed in with my Asian race appearance, so people don't see it. They don't see lesbian when they look at me so much.
It's interesting. And you
Yeah.
think it has to do with the fact that you're of Asian background and not like, do you think that's
But it took me a lot in my youth to overcome that stereotype of the Asian woman, femme fatale, as it were,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
which of course I was eager to play up to the hilt. Given any opportunity to perform a persona,
Yeah.
could dress it up,
So what I found really interesting and really important with the book was your perspective on how Thai culture views gender nonconformity or maybe even homosexuality and the whole third sex idea. So could you talk a little bit about just how that is understood in the culture? Because Westerners, for the most part, especially the queer ones, they have it all wrong.
Right, right. Yes. I was a gender non-conforming child. So it was apparent to my relatives that I was possibly gay.
Mhm.
And there is,
So, real quick, did they equate gender nonconformity with being homosexual very early?
yes,
Okay. Interesting.
and still do.
Mhm.
So I knew the word katoi referred to people who cross-dressed. And it was most often applied to men,
Mhm.
feminine appearing men who may or may not dress up as women, what we would know as ladyboys here in the state. But it also pertained to girls who were tomboys. Then they adopted the term tomboy later on.
Okay.
So I knew of it, and that gave me a huge head start in coming out in the States when everything was so closeted. So I knew that I was attracted to women in high school, and I didn't try to suppress that. But I also knew that the culture, the American culture, was very homophobic. So I was kind of paranoid about coming out. So that was my confluence of both cultures.
Yeah, you could see that, both that struggle even with the sexuality part of it and, the identity part of it.
Yes. So, but because I was confident that I was not in the wrong, uh, contrary to so many of my peers at the time who were like, this is bad, I shouldn't do this. And so it took them longer. It took them to college to come out, usually brought out by another lesbian.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So my question about the idea of the third gender over there, or was it a third sex, third gender? How do they view it? Is it
Well, they don't really call it third gender. That's
okay?
something that we in the States have come up with. They would just say, oh, there goes a katoi, a cross-dressing person.
Okay.
I don't even know the word gender in Thai. We have boy and girl, and not even man and woman in the language.
Oh, interesting.
They're just
Okay.
male, female.
Yeah.
And there is no pronoun problem because there's only one pronoun for everyone.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And one for animals. So the hierarchy is different. And so it's in a way more integrated into the culture. They're much more interested in your social rank, your family background, your wealth, where you came from in the country. So they are much more likely to distinguish between your status as class status.
Mm-hmm.
And then within the family, we have all the rankings of those who are older and younger. So we have words for elder and younger, and that also implies that you are to defer to your elders.
Okay. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. A lot of this I don't know because I'm just a
Yeah.
Westerner.
Right. So I think that's fairly common with other Asian cultures as well, that
Mhm.
the respect flows upward. Whereas here we're individualistic culture, we prize youth for being the innovators.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely a total reversal. I know that. It's like it's seen as bad to get old.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate because we're all going to get old. We all get old. Um, so you have a bit in here when you talk about you being a rambunctious little kid and running around and doing this stuff, and your aunt basically informing you kind of your difference or whatever. Like,
Yes. Yes.
tell us just briefly about that, because I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yes. She just stopped me, put a hand on my shoulder and says, "You have the spirit of a boy." And I was like, how cool is that?
But that's not the same as if it was being said by a Westerner, though, because so the reincarnation thing, how does that kind of fit into that idea? Because that's very interesting.
Because it totally implied a reincarnation story. That so it was cool to understand that, yes, I'd had a life before, I'd had experience in a prior life, and not only that, a male experience. So it comes up in conversation quite a lot in Thai culture to talk about, oh, maybe that happened in a past life, or maybe I have karma with this person. So we have to work it out, and I don't want to make it worse by taking revenge. So I'm just gonna stay cool and hope that we finalize our contract in this life. They don't have to come and do it again. And other movies too, popular TV series, they love this reincarnation stuff. It gets very complicated because so many characters of your past life and coming into play in this life, and so it's sometimes hard to follow.
Couldn't it be said, though, that probably every person has been one sex or the other throughout their existence, though?
Certainly in the reincarnation concept, because the soul has no gender and no body until it's manifested. And then the circumstances too comes with it. So you learn to adapt to your new life and see what you can do with it.
But I guess where I'm getting like I'm like, okay, so she said you had the spirit of a boy, but wouldn't she probably have had some reincarnation as a man as well?
I'm sure, but she didn't tell any of those stories to me. She didn't imply that possibility to me.
So I was just wondering, like, what makes is it like, what makes the manifestation of that past through reincarnation come out in some and not others? Is it because you're closer? Like, was the reincarnation closer in your background, or do you know what I'm trying to understand? Like,
yes, it's implied that you have unresolved issues from that past life, so you have to work it out in this life. So say I was a man in my last life and I was insensitive to women, treated them badly, was a patriarch or something. So to learn the lessons of that incarnation, I would then incarnate as a woman so that I would know the other side of the picture.
Okay. I think I'm getting it. I get it. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. That's so interesting. And it's I think it's cool that it's so integrated in the society that it's not going to stand out like it does to Westerners, you know. But it seemed like you found this idea to be comforting for you and to be helpful for you.
Yes, because I was such a tomboy. I wasn't your typical girl wanting to dress up and be into all of that.
Which is such a typical story. I mean, it's such a typical story, especially with those of us that would be categorized as butch or toms or whatever, you know.
Right.
Most of us have a long history of being tomboys, you know.
Exactly. And my mother was a tomboy too, so she says. But she was raised in London during the war, World War II. So she played in the rubble. You could hardly not be a tomboy. And, tough and resilient
Yeah.
was the characteristic of that generation. So my wanting to charge around the house on my bicycle, ringing my bell loudly, announcing myself, and climbing trees and exploring all that the outdoors had to offer, told me that I was a tomboy. And I also staged myself in photographs as like I had a sailor outfit. So I put that on and had my friend photograph me like I was a sailor. And I believed that I would totally look like a sailor. But when I saw the photographs, I was like, I just look like a kid.
I think I had the experience too as a kid, thinking I was going to look super cool. And I looked at the photo and I was like, that didn't come off the way I thought it would.
Right. So in that sense, I understood myself as having this masculine impetus to present. But there was also the idea that this is a collective society. So we are integrated into our family and our social circle, and there's a role to play. So if my grandmother says we're going somewhere special and you have to wear a dress, then I was like, okay, that's my role representing my family. I'm going to be introduced to important people. I'm a diplomat, so of course I will wear whatever.
That's a good way of looking at it too. I should have looked at it that way. I probably would have had less fights.
Right. Yeah.
Now, as you get older though, is there a division? You talked about toms, you talked about the lady boys. Is there room for lesbians who are not masculine in the society? Like what maybe we would categorize as femmes?
Right. And there certainly is, because the toms date the femmes.
Yeah, which I figured, but I didn't quite know how that was understood, right?
Yeah. And I hadn't really explored how they would explain the femme presentation. Being a femme in Thailand isn't a whole lot different from being a woman who's marrying a man, a heterosexual woman, because your presentation is still the role you play. So if a tom is dating a femme, the tom would expect to pay for dinner and escort the femme around in that masculine feminine role playing. And that's how I didn't really want to embrace that expression of my homosexuality, because it seems so rigid. But in a culture where individualism isn't the most important thing, you want to be understood for your race. For your role in life.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Whereas in the States, and I came of age here in the States, and I found the lesbian community, even though it was so attempting to be gender neutral, it was still better than having to play a role.
Yeah.
I could at least say, well, I'm a theater major, so I'm going to dress up for this.
Yeah. So when I hear about, and I also want to just talk about the fact that in their culture, in Thai culture, they don't see these individuals as the opposite sex that they are not, right? Sex still trumps everything else. It is understood, right?
Yeah, because then if you wouldn't dare to insult your mother by implying that a ladyboy could be a woman,
Ah, interesting.
because, you know, your parents are very highly regarded. That's how I see it. So, and also there's a difference between the reincarnated soul and the biological reality of our incarnation. So there's a little bit of a separation there, and the lesson to accept, you know, accept what you cannot change.
Yeah.
In fact, the Serenity Prayer perfectly characterized what I believed to be Thai culture and attitude, philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, and you wrote about that, and I was like, yeah, it really, it does sum it up, right? It's about just accepting reality,
Right.
you
And
know,
that is the what you came to do in
and
the
learn
life.
from it.
Yes.
Learn from this experience. It would do no good to change, try to change
Yeah.
yourself or your body, because then you're not learning from your experience, or you might be messing up even more doing all that.
Right. But of course, the irony of Thai culture is that Bangkok was a sex change capital of the world before, you know, this whole gender clinic
Okay, so
started.
then that's confusing. So then why are they attempting to change, to alter their I don't get it. If
Yeah. Yes, you might well ask. Because it's there.
because it's there, because it can.
Because you can.
Oh, it's okay.
So it's something that you can buy like any other status item. You know, if you are upwardly mobile, you buy a Mercedes. If you
Interesting.
are a lady boy, you buy your tits.
Huh. Okay.
And it's not really seen as that humans can change sex. It's more pragmatic than that. That, I mean, they do tattoos for Buddhist purposes to imprint across your body all of the Buddhist texts, and then non-religious tattoos just for totem animals. So augmenting the body is not unusual. The hill tribe people did it with those neck things and
Mm-hmm.
and all the other piercings, and so it's available. So why
So
not?
it's definitely viewed as more of a, I could buy this augmentation that is going to make me inhabit this role I have
Yes,
more or better.
right. It's
Okay.
a enhancement.
Yeah. And
Whereas here we've gotten on it all like, well, if I do this, then I am actually changing my sex.
yeah.
So that's the subtle difference.
Mm-hmm.
And also all of the justification of, by, you know, chromosomes of different varieties, intersex, and all of those excuses are important for trans culture in the States.
Yeah.
That no one would even bother to talk about it in Thailand. That, oh, my chromosomes dictate that I am the opposite sex, so I must go that way. It's just not. It's like, why complicate the information? So
Yeah. So you got into lesbian community, when did you move to the San Francisco area?
well, I never actually, we moved to the Bay Area.
Oh, okay, okay. So you've lived in that area for a very long time then?
Yes. And as I grew up, the distance appeared shorter, you know, because I had mobility. I could take the train or drive. to the city is 30 miles away. So it was easy to get to. It was kind of like you had to get your state of mind into a San Francisco state of mind from the suburbs.
No, I feel you. I actually kind of hate San Francisco. I just do not like to go up there. It's just too much. It's too crowded. It's just like feels like everything's like just coming in on you, you know?
Yes.
So were you pretty active in LGBT, like gay liberation, you know, the community, bookstores, whatever that was going on throughout that time?
Yes, there was a Gay People's Union at Stanford University that I could go to, and that's where most of my social interactions with my lesbian peers happened. Even though most of us didn't even go to Stanford University.
Okay, that's interesting.
It was open to the whole community. And then for the bigger events like Pride, wasn't called Pride at the time, gay liberation, we would go to San Francisco.
Mhm.
And as soon as I got my motorcycle, I would go up there with my lesbian comrade who also had a motorcycle, and we'd follow along with the Dykes on Bikes. That was in my early 20s.
Wow.
So it really felt like I could enter the gay lesbian community in the late 70s and early 80s before AIDS and become a part of that scene
Mhm.
as it was unfolding. And of course, it was much smaller then.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
only like Polk Street and Castro Street.
Did you stay active in the gay community throughout your life? Or did you kind of do what a lot of lesbians do and kind of fade out to do your own thing?
Yeah. Yes, I did fade out because it seemed like we'd done our job, that gay people had become more accepted and gay marriage was in the works, and that wasn't my thing at all, really. So
Okay, that wasn't your fight. You're like, I'm not going to get on board with this.
yeah, it was like, why are we adopting the whole heteropatriarchy thing in order?
So you definitely see you definitely taken on the second wave feminist kind of views of this kind of
Right.
stuff. Do you
Yes.
consider
Yes.
yourself like a radical feminist or second wave feminist?
I would say I was second wave feminist because all my elders in the lesbian community were already deeply involved in moving lesbian visibility and lesbian culture along. They helped me get some of my essays published in anthologies that covered anything from lesbian culture in general to Girl Scouts.
Mhm.
There's a whole anthology about lesbian experiences in Girl Scouts, and
Yeah.
then polyamory and whatever came up that I could contribute to. I had these mentors I knew who could help me get noticed. And
Mhm.
also because I wasn't white, I had that caveat of offering a diversity.
Which is a little bit of a dirty word now.
Yeah, it's all of that is language has sort of been stolen, and
Yeah.
as you know.
You're not the first older lesbian that has been like, yeah, I wasn't in for the marriage thing. I just think it's
Right,
interesting, you
right.
know.
Yes.
What did you see needing to be done though? Did you want legal recognition of the of women wanting to, you know, build their lives together? Like, were you like, look, let's not call it marriage, let's call it something else? Or
Yes, I thought that we should have that right. And as it went along, I realized that the government didn't allow human coupling human families to form legally. Like in Thailand, we were registered on, for each house had all of the occupants registered, and it was sort of assumed that this was the collective family, that the whole family would look out for each other,
Oh, okay.
including staff, that we were responsible for this whole list of people in our house. Whereas here, this is all you get, is two people get to have that power to look out for each other. So as the whole discussion went along, I realized that we better embrace gay marriage, because that was all that two people would be able to do legally, to join together.
Yeah. Did you think it should be called something else though? Did you not like the idea of it
wish-
being marriage?
You know, civic union was toyed around with, and also the idea that any two people could have a union, a legal union, was also interesting to me.
Mhm.
That it didn't just have to be a traditional sexual relationship or child rearing relationship.
Mm.
And I strongly believe that children should have an extended family to help raise them. So, you know, I never really solved it in my mind how to rearrange American society to look like Thai society.
No, right? Yeah, I feel you. I I grew up in more my father's side was Portuguese, from the Azores, and they are very much the same, of very family units. And everybody looks out for each other. And um, so a lot of times that I understand that experience, I think more than maybe some other Europeans do, because it's a little different, you know. I think especially because they were from the Azores, it's a small area and everybody's going to be living in very close together and in small groups, and you know, it's definitely more family orientated. But there is definitely a whole chunk of like European culture that's very just individualistic, and you know, kind of set up for like the man to own the woman kind of situation and own the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the
But
whole homesteading in the wilderness, in
yeah,
the log cabin kind of ethos.
I was a big I was really pushing for gay marriage, and the reason I did is I think now in hindsight I wouldn't have, though. In hindsight I would have actually preferred it be something separate. Just because I think we were being a little too pushy and not respecting other people's boundaries with the marriage thing. So like, you know, I just would have been like, look, just have something legal under the law, under the government, that allows any two people to get joined and be responsible for each other legally, and just call it something else. Civil union is fine. Call it something else.
Right.
And also don't mandate churches need to follow it or religions need to follow it, because that's, you know, it's an invasion. But the reason I did really push for it was, like you said, you know, me and my wife, we met in 2001 and we've been together for that long. And there was a time where she ended up in the hospital, and her mother had to advocate for me being allowed in there and advocate for me being able to make decisions. And even when she did that, they still would go to her mother for something, even though I was standing right there, and she'd be like, that's her wife. That's her partner. Ask her about that, you know? So that was hard. And I didn't want to have to deal with that. And I
Yeah.
also, you know, I don't have a good relationship with my mom's side of the family. I didn't want them to have any say in anything that could come down the line of health, or, you know, I wanted my wife to have that decision. So,
Yeah. The whole hospital thing was probably the one piece of it that really made marriage make sense. Just
that was the big thing in my head, at least.
Yeah.
That was my big thing was that.
And then children too.
Yeah, which we did adopt a son. So we
Ah.
do have, you know, a kid involved as well.
Right.
Yeah, we did the very heteronormative. Which everybody should have the right to choose what they want to do, right? When it comes to that.
Right.
Either don't have
And
anything to do with the system or be part of the system, whatever.
and now that our women's movement for gender critical is very focused on children. So now I'm like, why should we call it heteronormative
Yeah.
to partner and have children? Why isn't this a social need for everyone?
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't really buy into too much of that language, but it's, just to throw it out there what people say.
Yes.
Sometimes I've heard it mentioned. Okay, so when did you start to see some red flags in the community?
Well, in what was it, 2016, I'd been in a long-term relationship for almost 20 years, so I didn't know what was going on exactly in
That's such a lesbian story, right? We do tend to get in relationships and kind of drop out, right?
yes. So when I was then divorced, I was going on Match.com, which was a whole new innovation.
Oh, the whole online dating thing. Yeah.
And I was, of course, there were trans women in the lesbian category, and I was like, what is this new phenomena? So I communicated with 2 trans women, kind of got their story, and met one of them for dinner. And it was at that time that I realized this is really a man with all the male privileges. This was a man in his late 50s who had transitioned, already had a career and children and a wife that he had to jettison, leave Texas, come to California, and introduce himself to his colleagues as a woman and kind of start fresh like that. And then, so that, I could kind of understand that whole story. But when he said, it looks like I'll have to identify as a lesbian, it just like opened my eyes, like, wait a minute, what? It's like my whole life flashed before me, all the work that I had done being published in newspapers and writing was to get lesbians visible.
Yeah.
And how dare a man come in and say, I guess I'll have to settle for this identity.
Jesus.
And how dare he assume that other lesbians would accept him as a lesbian and accept that he would date them. I mean, that was the crux of it.
Yeah. But what I found interesting though is you say that you went to dinner with this guy, and it was then when you talked to him that you realized, oh, he is a dude. But like, were you questioning before if they were or not? Like, I don't understand. Did you not know that these trans women were men, or were you confused about the labeling?
Well, I knew that they were men, but I was interested to understand what it was about them that in their minds transformed them into women.
Okay.
Like, was this a soul that really was a woman?
It almost sounds like you were looking for the woman there somewhere.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
And it just became more and more clear that no, this is a man who is socialized as a man and is aggressive and a bit self-centered and
A bit. Just a bit.
And not at all interested in asking me about myself or what I, thought of things, and didn't.
What if you went on this dinner and you saw some woman essence there? Would that have changed something? Because it's still a man body, still a fucking man.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to date a male body.
Okay.
But if this was a new phenomenon in the world, and it wasn't as if it was, the only new thing about it was that these men were heterosexual, because why would they be chasing lesbians? And and they were so adamant that they were women, whereas before we had our transvestites and trans whatever in the gay community who were firm in their understanding that they were men, and that this was an alternate presentation, like a male presentation of what a woman was, for performance, for jokes, for irony, for all those things that the gay community was so good at, was to mock and criticize heterosexual community. And this was a way to do it. So that was what was new, was like, oh, here comes a being that actually is going to live as a woman and believe they are a woman. That was the new presentation. So I was trying to understand it. And it wasn't until, later we came to discuss AGPs, autogynephiles, and sexual fetishes and all that, that I began to understand that we're being taken over by heterosexuals.
Yeah. So the venture into the online dating was kind of your first exposure to these guys creeping in lesbian spaces.
Right.
And what was your next kind of signpost you reached where you're like, what?
A friend of mine who's bisexual, but had first come out as a lesbian in the second wave feminist time, contacted me and told me about this young woman, a daughter of a friend of hers, who thought she was trans. And she explained to me that this was what was happening to young lesbians. So I immediately was like outraged that, I had been in the closet throughout high school trying not to be a lesbian. And now here was this impetus coming into the high school age saying, you could be a man. I immediately saw the whole conversion therapy piece of it going on there.
It hit you real fast. Exactly. Yes. That's what it was.
Because of the gender nonconformity and my background with the Thai Tom saying, no, this should be accepted. It was as if American culture had not come to terms with cross-dressing as a normal expression of homosexuality. I mean, I couldn't speak to the heterosexual girls who wanted to become boys. That was a whole different arena altogether, which I now understand as just being plain misogyny. Girls are having more difficulty being boys. I mean, being girls.
So it's easier, especially when you're told you can jump ship. I mean, you're gonna jump ship, right?
I mean, what an option,
right?
And that's where I really sense the danger of it for girls. And so I totally got it. I didn't need any more convincing. And she was my first turf buddy, as it were. And it was 2020 when we were all locked down in our confines. So we were communicating regularly about, have you seen this? Have you read that? Have you looked at this? And then we got a couple of her guy friends who were interested in the conversation, because one of them was Derek Jensen, who is the first speaker who was canceled.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
What's his background?
He's an environmentalist, a writer. He had a speaking career at every green festival.
Yeah.
And he had a movement called the Deep Green Resistance, and the women in it wanted to have a women's group, and they didn't want a trans woman to join. And Derek supported them in that. And of course, all hell broke loose.
Wow.
And everywhere he went, the trans activists were out there shouting him down. He couldn't talk. His materials at the booth were like trashed. So he lost his speaking engagement income. So he and his best friend, who is also a social justice person working for other social issues like housing and labor, what have you. So they joined us. So the four of us were my first turf group, and we were exchanging information and talking.
What a great group to be in to get that stuff. I mean, like I've listened to some of his there was a video that went around a while ago of him talking, I think it's him, pretty sure, talking about queer theory and the whole queer idea and how that links up with pedophilia.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
in a classroom setting, I think.
Right.
And I was just
Right.
like, whoa, it's the first time I
Yeah.
heard someone link those together like that.
Right. So it was very helpful to have his insights, and the four of us had insights on this, and just to express outrage,
Yeah.
because there wasn't anywhere that we could freely express such outrage.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that, like, I'm assuming you guys were all lefties too, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Lifelong lefties.
it's been so frustrating for me to be like just chucked out and said I'm right wing. Just nope. You don't. It's like, it's also so disturbing to see how authoritarianism has taken over
Right.
the left so much. This is not progress.
No.
At all. It is not progress to silence people. It is not progress to have colleges college is the place people are supposed to be uncomfortable. You're supposed to be uncomfortable. You're supposed to talk about hard issues,
Right.
College is not a safe space. You're an adult now.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And we're seeing what that led to. But
And
when
the whole point is, if you disagree, you're supposed to be smart enough, resilient enough to come up and formulate an argument back, right? To either discredit or to bring about another idea. That's how you do that.
Totally on us
Mm-hmm.
to disseminate the information, analyze it, and come back with rage-free statements to try and pique people.
Oh God. Yeah.
Which has been, my job since I published the book. I didn't even want to write this book because I knew it would get me into such hot water. And I'd been enjoying this lovely platform as an environmentalist.
Yeah.
With all the things I was doing.
The trans stuff has definitely taken over every aspect of the left, and and it's just like there's just no room for anything else. And that's got to be really frustrating. It's like, look, we're not even talking about trans stuff here. We're talking about, like, environmental stuff. Why don't we just stay on topic?
Really.
When did you publish the book? Or when did it come out?
It was last June.
Last June. Okay.
Right in time for Pride Month.
Right? Yeah. I'd heard it mentioned a couple times, and I have to say the title at first I went, what? Yes. That's quite the title.
It's a provocative title, yes.
It is. It is a provocative title. Yeah, and you do talk a lot about trying to pique people in here and just how frustrating that is, that you can't even have a conversation with people. Also, what I find it interesting too, that you immediately, as a lesbian and as someone who went through gender nonconforming, and are gender nonconforming, I like that you immediately saw the issue here for lesbians. You immediately saw it, and it's so frustrating that why do you think more lesbians don't see it? Do you think they just didn't have that experience of gender nonconformity, or What are we missing here?
They forgot.
They forgot. Yeah. I often wondered that about a lot of gay folks, because when I first came out and was having conversation with gay men and lesbians, um, most of us had some kind of gender nonconformity in our youth, or we're told as made fun of as little kids for being, gay, or, sissy or whatever. So how do you forget that experience?
I don't know, but they showed me all their childhood photographs in their cowboy outfits and carrying their toy weaponry, assault weapons.
What I've noticed is I've noticed that it seems like oftentimes, and I'm just talking about lesbians here because that's what we are. Um, what I notice with lesbians is they tend to view that it's different if someone has gender dysphoria. That's the break line. Oh, well, of course, gender nonconformity doesn't mean you're, trans, and of course this, and of course that, but oh, the gender dysphoria. Well, now that means you're trans. And as a lesbian who's struggled with what is categorized as gender dysphoria for most of my life, I find that I feel like I was thrown under the bus by other lesbians, because it's like, can you not understand why a lesbian might have an issue with her body and with herself as a woman? Like, can we not even fathom why that might be?
And because of my Tom background, I knew that a lot of it had to do with the homophobia of cross-dressing presentations.
It really is. I like that you say that. It's a problem with the cross-dressing, and it really is.
Because as we were becoming accepted, we talked a lot about assimilation, how we should look more straight and say, well, the only difference is that we are same sex. We're still like you. And there was a lot more kind of lipstick lesbian activity in the presentation, and men would wear suits and ties to the presentations, and we would just look as normal, mainstream, so that we wouldn't bring in all of the fringe aspects of what was thought of as fringe.
Yeah.
There was one parade where the dykes on bikes were actually told that we had to ride mid-parade, that we couldn't lead the parade because that was too out there to have all these leather-clad lesbians, some of them bare-breasted, come riding through primetime TV, maybe. And
well, maybe it shouldn't be on TV. Like, I don't know.
I don't think we made it to TV even then. This was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So they said, try not to do the whole cross-dressing thing, men in drag, and that man with the boa constrictor, half naked. So just tone it down so we can present as if we were mainstream, normal suburban people. Well, it didn't last too long in San Francisco. The following year, the Dykes on Bikes were back at the head of the parade. All the drag queens were out, and then we were faced with AIDS. So the whole social thing changed.
Yeah.
Into another drama. But yes, I do believe that the main problem is this discomfort with cross-dressing. And in Thailand, because we have this term katoi, and we have been used to cross-dressing and the whole role-playing of those relationships going back hundreds of years, people are like, oh, I understand it. Reincarnation, karma, expressing itself, whatever.
Yeah, move along.
Yeah. And all the lady boys can safely go to the bathroom in the men's room.
I like that. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah. You actually can have a society where men can go to the men's room in a dress. Why aren't we pushing for that? Like, isn't that real acceptance?
Yeah, but no, we hardly have a ability to express that men are perpetrators.
Mm.
You know, have the potential to be perpetrators, much more so than women. That there is a difference. We've spent so much time in the feminism that became third wave feminism in diminishing the difference between men and women, that we can no longer stand up for those differences. So we can't acknowledge male violence. And that's why we can no longer protect women, but we can protect trans women because they're under the LGBTQ.
That's got to be, it's for an elder like you, it's got to be just so frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating for me, but I can't imagine you've seen like the whole process,
Yes. And
you know?
in the biggest, gayest town in the country.
Yes.
So
And
there's just been so many different strategies and attempts to make us okay. And now that we think we've won, we're pushing all of the perversity to the forefront. Like, this is gay too. Let's celebrate Awesome Street Fair, you know, nakedness on the street and whatever. I don't even want to get into it.
yeah, like there's nothing wrong with adults in an adult environment doing adult things, but there is a time and a place,
Yeah,
and that doesn't belong in public. That doesn't belong where there's children. That doesn't belong where there's families. You know, like, why can we not? You know, yeah, it's very disgusting to see perversion linked up with homosexuality, because I thought we tried to get away from that. That was the
right.
whole point,
We've
you know?
really tried to squelch that so we could be accepted.
Yeah.
And now
The
we've
thing, the,
arrived.
the thing about the cross-dressing though, like when you're talking about the, you know, how you guys were asked to tone it down and stuff, it reminded me of like much earlier in like the 50s and even the 60s when they were trying to, you know, do some advocacy. They were just like, no, you have to wear a dress and you have to wear a suit if you're a guy and a dress if you're a woman. It doesn't matter how you do. Like, so yes, that cross-dressing has always been a big issue.
Right.
And like,
Maybe,
and even now we've gone completely back to that, because now if a girl wants to cut her hair and wear quote unquote boys clothes, she's trans,
yes, or
you know?
non-binary.
Oh, the non-binary label is so fucking stupid.
Yes.
And notice that most of the non-binary is just a woman who's not completely like looking like Barbie. I mean, that's
Right.
what non-binary is. You don't look like Barbie, well, you're not really a woman, you're something else. You're a non-man. I love that one too.
Yeah.
Non-man. We've gone all the way back to ancient Greece at this point.
I mean, if this is what it takes for American society to accept cross-dressing, it's a twisted path. But we
Yeah,
have
you basically telling people, no, you better chop up your body if you want to dress a certain way. I'm like, wow, you know, that's
yeah.
pretty extreme.
I mean, we're being exploited by the medical industrial.
Oh, definitely. I mean, of course, with America, that always ties right in there. Money is a huge part of this whole movement. I mean, obviously, this isn't going to be taking over every aspect of society if there's not money behind it. That's not how it works. Oh, the epilogue, when you talked about how um that the trans community seems to be quite violent, trans activist and stuff, and that's very concerning. And the shooter, the
Mm,
woman
yes.
shooter who they
It's,
said was
yeah.
trans or something. Did we ever get any more information out of that? We didn't,
No,
huh?
no. Um, there was some supposed leaks, but it's still hard to know what was the motivation.
Yeah. But I
And
mean,
there are more now. There are more trans shooters. They're just
yeah.
not acknowledged.
Oh, you talked about the library thing too, with the baseball bats and that the
Yeah.
punch turf shirt and everything. Did you like come upon that yourself and see it? Or was that something you heard about?
It happened just a year before I learned about it, and there's an online display that shows all of what was shown there. So
So
I could see it see the Kill Our Turf T-shirt and the colorful baseball bats with the barbed wire wrapped around them.
what was your first thought when you saw that?
It
As a
just,
lefty.
well, it was clearly so violent and being justified as protest paraphernalia. And then I also knew that there had been some lesbians who had tried to protest with signs that said, "Stop puberty blockers," and they were pushed to the ground. And they were elders like me or older. So they were being ousted. And I could see that this whole new ethic had come to the front. And it was kind of seen, because it was framed as art, it was kind of seen as just a metaphorical presentation rather than actual violence. But it soon became clear from at least feminists who were holding discussions, such as I went to, that Karadansky was leading, and there was a conference for the Women's Declaration International, I think is the acronym, in San Francisco, and they were out in force, the trans, and they were writing their slogans on the sidewalk, and it was just clear that they felt justified. And they were also saying, "We've been here forever," you know, which refers to the third gender, which always riles me up, because it's
Right.
like, what? You're appropriating my cultural heritage for your purposes that completely denies biological reality, which we never did.
Yeah.
What could be a bigger act of cultural imperialism than that?
Oh, the whole movement is about appropriation. They gobble up everything they come across and claim it as their own. It's because they have no actual identity at all, or no existence to stand on in reality. So they have to take over other things that do exist in reality. When you were at the WDI thing, what kind of slogans were they putting on the sidewalk and signs and stuff like that?
Kill all turfs, the usual.
Anything particularly violent that struck you?
Well, it was more the nonsensical. I mean, there was one sign that says, "I eat toast for breakfast," and that,
What are we, 12 here? What?
yeah, it had a picture of 2 eggs, you know, on toast, and they left that sign. Those young people came into the hotel after the day was over to get refreshments, and they didn't bother to take their signs with them. And we were at another table nearby, so we just scooped them up. So I was able to take a picture of my breakfast with the "We eat turfs for breakfast."
That's great.
And it was a big moment for me to show my friends, all my 35 LGB friends, along with my 300 other colleagues, entrepreneurs, what have you, that this was not a right-wing movement,
Yeah.
that the trans had identified feminists, particularly second wave feminists, as the enemy. And here was proof, you know, signs like "Real feminists accept trans," and that sort of thing. And then all the anarchist spray paint all over the doors and windows of this pop-up place we had for exhibiting women's art who had been canceled. Just regular artists who made clothing or embroidered patches, who were no longer allowed to sell things because trans had deemed that they were transphobic, horror of horrors. So their museums that were selling their stuff had to immediately pull everything. Some stayed to fight.
God, that's not how democracy works, people.
Yes.
By the way.
And I would repeatedly remind my friends that I had the right to speak.
No.
Which they accept that, because they couldn't very well say that I didn't. They could say I don't agree with you, or try to bombard my thread with other information. But I keep at it because I want to make sure that we still have this capacity to speak out.
Yeah.
And because I designed my life in such a way that I can speak out, I work for myself, and my clients don't really care what I think. So I am available. I can speak under my name, which is rare in our movement. And
it definitely is.
It's allowed me to push forward more with this message because I'm available. I'm like, someone says, you're the one, you can speak under your own name. This is more powerful than having women all masked up and going who cannot speak and don't, all their Twitter handles are pseudonyms.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to nobody recognizing male violence anymore, right? Acting like women don't have a right to be very nervous about men who are really pissed off.
Yeah. And I point out to my mates that this is political terrorism.
Yeah.
That people have to fear for their livelihood and their community standing.
I really liked in the book how you talked about how when you got into the TERF group and you met a lot of other women, how this movement has brought together lesbians and straight women and just women, period. And even women who are not lefties, women who are conservative, or women who are religious. And I've noticed that too. And for me, it's been very empowering. I think it's awesome because ultimately at the end of the day, we are all women, and these are very basic rights that are being violated.
Yes. Yes. That's the most powerful aspect of it. Because when I was in the lesbian community, we had a huge tendency to be ghettoized. And we kind of protected those boundaries. All our parties were lesbians and books and all that. So it is so much more powerful that we can now have straight women who are allies of lesbians. I mean, I don't remember a time when I was so accepted and supported by straight women.
I will agree with that. Yeah.
And that is new, and it does allow us to learn from each other and also learn what we had in common.
Yeah, it's really a cool thing to see. And one of the things that struck me a while ago was what's her name? Is it Riley Gaines?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so she was speaking on a news program. Might have been Fox, but I don't remember which one it was. And there was a gay dude on there who was defending the trans rights advocates or whatever. And he basically did that whole age-old thing. What about lesbians in the locker room? that lesbophobic bullshit. And I love that Riley stuck up for us. She was like, basically, what about it? They're women. What are you talking about? You know? And I
Yeah.
was like, thank you, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted your perspective on just the disappearing of lesbian community. Why do you think it's disappeared?
It takes so much work to keep it going, to keep book stories, movies published. There hasn't traditionally been a lot of money in the lesbian community as there was in gay community. I mainly kept tabs on the movies because I would go to the Frameline Film Festival in San Francisco, and you could kind of see the evolving culture. And it's still seems to be holding its own to have lesbian movies, gay movies, bi movies never really
Yeah.
hold. And they're trying to do trans movies in sort of more collective. The trans movies became their own film festival, but it was still represented somewhat in the Frameline Film Festivals. I think that the San Francisco gay culture is so strong that I rarely see trans women in the Castro, if at all, or at any of the events that surround the gay community. So it's lesbians who are getting infiltrated, and we don't have any spaces anymore.
Well, and it's because it's white dudes that are really like,
Yeah.
you know, that want into these spaces. And of course that goes back to that when there is the women who transition or do the trans identity into being a man or whatever, and try to go into gay male spaces, they get told to, you know, hit the bricks, you know.
Right,
And
right.
generally they do, because you know what, they're women, and women are generally trained to do what men say. And so off they go. That's something I noticed when I was still trans identified in the trans community, is like power dynamics still existed between males and females, just like they did everywhere else, no matter what you identified as or what you were dressed as. Yeah.
I also heard of a few strategies. For instance, the men started a dating app where their profile picture was a picture of their penis.
Oh, because gay men will just go there.
Yeah. So, you know, that was one way to determine the biological reality of themselves. And then I heard another story of a gay man who was quite short, who often had encountered men who would just pick up his shirt to see if he had scars.
Ah, see, they no bullshit.
Yeah. And what can we do as lesbians to kind of duck and cover in this way?
Well,
Because,
I think it's a lot of female socializations holding us back.
yeah, my lesbian peers just don't see that that trans women being in our space is a problem. Typical response would be, oh yeah, there are trans women, but they don't bother me.
Are these women who are your same age?
Yeah.
Well, that's why they're not bothering you. You know who they're bothering? Have you talked to a lesbian who's just come out and she's like in her 20s?
I can't
Guess who they're bothering? You know?
Yeah.
Because after all, these are men These are
Right.
straight men. They're
Uh-huh.
not interested in someone over the age of probably 35.
Yes, right.
Just no thought of how it affects the other people though. That like that's just so boggles my mind, right?
Right. Or just the idea that women should have or be able to have a place to just be talk about women's issues and being women or have that companionship.
Yeah, definitely. Well, any final thoughts before we close out this conversation? Thank you so much for coming on my channel and discussing your book. It's great, and I liked it, and I think people need to go read it. Women, lesbians need to read it.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts, though?
No, I'm loving that you're doing interviews with how women get peaked.
Mm.
I kind of feel like I was born peaked
Yeah, how so?
because the gender nonconformity of it was known to me.
You were inoculated.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is.
Yes.
You were inoculated against this bullshit. You're like, oh, no, that doesn't make no sense to me.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
And yeah, have a good rest of your day.